Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We hope your day is off to a good start. My name is Naomi Wolf, and I am a part of the Canadian Urban Institute with the Community of Practice of the Healthy Communities Initiative. February has begun, and we're continuing our community mobilization sessions on the theme of winter activation and getting outside together. Thank you for joining us. As you know, the purpose of these sessions is to have the opportunity to hear from community builders, local leaders, urbanists, activists, and placemaking practitioners as we gather inspiration, share knowledge, and hear stories about their work. Now, before we get started, there are a couple of friendly Zoom reminders I wanted to pass along. The first is that you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. So please make use of the chat function as much as possible. The second point is that this session is available in English and in French. To access the French interpretation, you will see a globe at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that globe, you will hear this session in French. As a final note, just please feel free to share your name and what territory you're joining us from in the chat. We would love to hear from you. And one more thing to help with the ease of this webinar. So in order to make it as interactive as possible, we will share with you an open note-taking document where we can all collaborate. So please feel free to include some information about what brings you to the session today. Feel free to add the link to your projects or organizations in the document as well. And also you can help support us in the note-taking process by just tossing in any important things you think have been missed. We appreciate all of your collaboration. So before beginning, I just want to acknowledge that I'm joining today from Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This territory is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. So what is today's session all about? Today's session is about winter activities and outdoor programming. It is related to our ability to continue gathering and being together outside during the winter months. This session will be guided by our partner organization, 880 Cities. Thank you, Jiya and Jayne, for being here with us. Together with 880 Cities, we also count on the participation of the leaders of two projects funded by the Healthy Communities Initiative. So we have Sarah Murray with us from the North Park Neighborhood Association. The North Park Neighborhood Association built a pop-up community center as part of the Healthy Communities Initiative. The pandemic has magnified the need for connection, programming, and information sharing, and the Lending Hub provides free games and sporting equipment, offers art workshops, and more. In December, they held an outdoor multicultural festival, and this month, the Community Lending Hub will be transformed into a little free craft store. The second person we have joining us is Catherine Schutzen from the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library. For the past 2 winters, the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library has launched story walks and activity walks along local parks and trails, focusing on activities that can be enjoyed passively without crowds. Pre-pandemic, they very much enjoyed hosting family skate days, much like a community picnic, at an outdoor ice rink located next to one of their branches. We're looking forward to their upcoming, soon to be announced outdoor event, which is part of the second round of Healthy Community Initiative projects. So I think that is all from our side for now. Over to you, Jiya and Jayne, to get started. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Naomi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Jiya Benni. I'm a project manager at 880 Cities. Today, we will present the Winter Placemaking Guide that we have developed over at 880 Cities. And like Naomi mentioned, we'll also talk to the 2 projects that we have at this session. I'm joined by my colleague, Jayne Armstrong, who's also a project manager at 880 Cities. And for those of you who don't know, 880 Cities is a nonprofit organization based in Toronto. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for people in cities, no matter their age, ability, or socioeconomic status. We are basically driven by asking a very basic, serious question. What if everything we did in our cities was safe, accessible, and enjoyable for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old? Then cities would be great for everyone. And this brings us to the Winter Placemaking Guide. The goal of presenting the guide to you is to give practical steps to implement winter placemaking and introduce to you the rationale behind it. Our main idea behind the guide was to build excitement about winter, provide evidence to support winter placemaking using an age-friendly lens, provide ideas and tools to implement your own winter placemaking using an equity-based approach, and to inspire cities to adopt a winter lens in all of their planning work. To explain winter placemaking and the guide in detail, I will pass it off to my colleague, Jayne. Jayne, over to you.
Thanks, Jiya. So what is placemaking? What is winter placemaking specifically? So placemaking at its core is about strengthening the connection between people and place. The practice of placemaking occurs when the local community has power, capacity, and resources to actively shape public spaces in a way to meet their needs and improve their everyday quality of life. So when looking for a definition of winter placemaking, we found that there really wasn't one, so we created our own. And we define winter placemaking as a means to re-envision the ways that public spaces are created and used in winter in order to foster social connection, physical activity, and the many benefits of a vibrant public realm all year round. Through the guide, we wanted to make the case for investing in winter placemaking by proving it has many benefits grouped into 3 categories. The first is health. Winter placemaking can combat social isolation and physical inactivity, can provide economic benefits that are abound in winter, and can support the local economy, as well as provide social benefits by creating opportunities for community connection. At 880 Cities, we are guided by 3 rights that we believe are key ingredients to make communities of all sizes more age-friendly. And we've taken these rights to inform the guide that we're presenting to you today. So first is the right to mobility, the right to public space, and the right to participate. We believe that these 3 rights should not be infringed upon by snow, sleet, hail, and rain, or whatever else winter brings. The first, the right to mobility. In a winter-friendly city, everyone, no matter age or ability, should have the right to move safely and independently by walking, biking, and using public transit. Design and maintenance of public spaces matters even more in snowy winter communities, but priorities for public maintenance are sometimes skewed. For example, the city of Saskatoon in 2019 spent $62 million on snow removal. But what was this money put towards? What was this money prioritizing? It was prioritizing the removal of snow on highways and arterial roads. Sidewalks were left in the dust and in the snow. This kind of urban design and policy prioritization has the greatest effect on the most vulnerable among us. But we wanted to keep the guide positive, so we highlighted some excellent examples from communities of all sizes who have begun to address the right to mobility during winter. The town of Wells, British Columbia, has a population of just over 200. They held a door-to-door outreach engagement with the town's elders that culminated in a drawn map of routes that should have priority snow clearing according to the mobility patterns of the seniors. This process established strong ties between the town, its most vulnerable, and the paramedic department, who are now first responders during snow, ensuring that the identified routes are shoveled. In the guide, we detail steps to implementing similar engagement processes in your community and provide precedents from communities of all sizes who have invested in the right to mobility during winter. Our second right is the right to public space. Everyone, regardless of where they live, should have access to high quality, maintained, programmed parks and public spaces in winter. But uncomfortable and unmaintained are 2 words that I would use to describe public spaces during winter in Toronto, at least. So we have built our cities to avoid winter. And when we do this, we've given up our right to public space that could be programmed and could be exciting. In North America, we shelter ourselves away for many months, many of the winter months, but in Scandinavian countries, outdoor public life largely remains the same. Scandinavians live by the quote that there's no bad weather, only bad clothing. Winter is a simple fact of life, and public life remains vibrant despite the elements. Our winter placemaking guide details how communities of all sizes throughout North America have taken winter head on by investing in public spaces and programming. But the right to public space doesn't end with outdoor spaces, but should extend to indoor amenities and services provided by public institutions, like libraries. Throughout the writing of this guide, the power of the library has been proven time and time again. In Lanark County, Ontario, the local library has begun to rent out ice grippers to seniors, and libraries throughout Ottawa have begun to give out winter cultural passes. The right to public space in winter is multifaceted and includes indoor public amenities. Our third right is the right to participate. Everyone has the right to participate and the right to have power in city building decisions, but often traditional models of consultation leave children, older adults, youth, lower income residents, and communities of color out of the loop. Winter communities, when they are creating winter strategies, need to focus on this right, on equity, and on hearing from those that are most impacted by winter. If we don't hear from those in mobility devices or senior citizens, then we're going to continue living in cities where winter shuts down all options for travel and for public life for these groups. So in the guide, we spilled the beans on our trade secrets for engagement. We wrote about the 880 rules of engagement and how they can be adopted in communities of all sizes. And we provided examples from knockout communities who have invested in quality, equitable engagement when investing in winter livability. We took those 3 rights that I explained and the 880 rules of engagement, and we crafted a section in the guide called How to Do Winter Placemaking. So where to do winter placemaking? It all starts with taking stock of your community assets. Take Houghton, Michigan, for an example, a community of 7,800 who embraced their largest public space, which was their streets, and transformed these spaces into the Jibba Jabba Rail Jam. Some rural and small communities think that because they don't have an identifiable downtown square or a main park to gather in, that placemaking can't be done. But Houghton proved that with community support, the power of volunteers, and the will to re-envision public space in winter, that placemaking can be a success anywhere. Another example of embracing your assets is in Perry, Iowa. This is a great example of a community who embraced their individual and cultural assets through the Perry Latinx Festival and Los Posadas. In previous years, the Los Posadas celebration was held in a recreation center out of town, but over time, the town of Perry embraced this cultural tradition and welcomed the event to take place in the town square, involving the business community and everyone else. In Perry, the town embraced the local individual and cultural assets to activate public spaces in new and creative ways during winter that are representative, that are inclusive, and that create a warmer winter for all. In the guide, we explain the importance of asset-based community development and provide best practices to adopting winter placemaking and the steps to do so throughout the guide's 4 pillars, which are winter mobility, winter fun and programming, winter warmth, and winter health and resources. Throughout these pillars, we've sought to prove the power of rural and asset-based community development, with examples ranging from the lighter, quicker, cheaper movement to investment in winterized urban design and policies. So I hope that you read through the winter guide and feel inspired to uncover your community's assets and how to engage with your community to create a warmer winter for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. That was wonderful. And it's always nice to see all these examples of winter placemaking. So now we could go to, we can speak with Sarah and Catherine about their projects. Sarah and Catherine, can we start our discussion now? Hello. Awesome. So we have Sarah Marie from North Park Community Center in Victoria, BC, and Catherine Schutzen from Innisfil Idea Lab and Library in Innisfil, Ontario, who are here to tell us about their projects. Welcome to the session, Sarah and Catherine. I have a few questions for you, so I'm just going to start. Could you both tell us a bit more about your projects and how they relate to winter activities? Maybe Sarah, you could start first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that presentation, Jane. I'm just so inspired watching all of these winter activities. A little bit chilly looking at it, but I also love the idea of not stopping in the winter just because it's cold. And yeah, thank you for all the work that you've done in putting together that placemaking guide. I think it's really going to be helpful in for a lot of us groups to start thinking of winter activities. Yeah, so I'm located out here on the West Coast on Vancouver Island. We're grateful to be located on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, also known as Victoria, BC. We're really excited we've been using the Healthy Communities Initiative grant to operate a pop-up community center here in North Park. We don't have a community center of our own, so for the last couple of years, we've been doing what we call a distributed.
Sorry, Sarah, I think people have trouble hearing you. Could you just speak a little louder?
Sure, is that any better?
It's good with me.
Okay.
I hope everyone can hear a little better, says
Sorry, I
Claudia.
was looking at the chat there. Can folks hear me a little bit better now? Okay, perfect. I'll hold this microphone up. It looks a bit awkward, but that's okay. Yeah, so we've been operating a little pop-up community center on a bicycle route, actually, right here in Victoria. And it's been great. We've been holding outdoor activities ever since August. And the focal point of our project is what's called a lending hub. So it operates as a larger than life little free library. We lend out board games and puzzles and lawn games and sports equipment. We also give away snacks and masks and sanitizer and art supplies. So it's a real sort of a community hub. And we're transforming it, actually launching on Thursday, we're transforming it into a little free craft store. So we're working with a local collaborator who diverts office supplies and things from moving companies out of landfills and into people's creative reuse projects. So it's a group called Supply Victoria, and we're really excited to be pairing up with them. And it's going to activate this space throughout the winter, or on the West Coast, as we call it, the rainy season. And it will be a spot where every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 2 to 6, people can stop by on their way home from daycare or work and shop for free craft supplies. Yeah, and we've also done a couple other things. We hosted a repair-a-thon with a local group that does repairs to outdoor gear and camping supplies and raincoats, and did free on-the-spot repairs. That was in the first week of January. And there was still snow on the ground, so we did get a big dump of snow in early January, which really puts the West Coast on a bit of a standstill. But it was great. And I think it actually reminded a lot of people that, oh, you know what, I would get outside more if I didn't have that hole in my raincoat kind of thing. So they brought it over for some free repairs. And then the most fun thing, in my opinion, has been a multicultural festival that we've been hosting at a local park. Jayne, I absolutely loved what you said about accessibility of parks and that they should be free to use for everyone. One of the largest parks in our neighborhood is mainly used for sporting events and concerts, and it's surrounded by a giant fence. So we worked really hard to make let the city use it, let us use it for free community events. So we've been hosting a multicultural festival there, and this will be the 3rd year that we do free accessible family programming in the park as well.
That's amazing, Sarah. Thank you. Catherine, how about you? What's happening in Innisfil?
Thank you so much. So many great things happening over on the West Coast there. So first, we're really excited about an upcoming project that I'm not allowed to talk about yet. So this is my teaser that if you're interested, just follow, Innisfil Idea Lab and Library around all the major channels to learn more about that in the coming weeks. But in the meantime, so Innisfil is just north of Toronto, and we are a mix of urban and rural. We're a geographically spread out community. So we really thrive on creating pockets of activities. And especially over the course of the pandemic, we've been really looking towards that kind of lighter, quicker, cheaper option of placemaking, and really utilizing our shoulder seasons and the winter months more than we ever have before. So we, being a small community and being a library in the community, we've started with some small installations and activations first. So a story walk using simple A-frames along one of our most popular trails along Lake Simcoe, which has just encouraged everybody to get out and enjoy something family friendly. You could do passively, big crowds were gathering. But because of its success and popularity, we were able to put some permanent signage along one of our other trails. So now we can program that space all year round, which is, really exciting to make sure that we're getting outside of our doors. So right now we have, it's a story is upcoming, but right now it's Snowman Says and I Spy. So as you travel through the woods along the path, there's lots of ways to stay active and engaged in that journey. And we kind of have come to this work through looking at the spaces we have, where people are naturally gathering, and any kind of underutilized spaces as well. So I think in the introduction mentioned that one of our library branches has an outdoor rink right beside us, which is not underutilized. It is well used. It's one of the only refrigerated rinks in our community, so it gets a bit of a longer lifespan than the other homemade ones. And, in the pre-pandemic times, we would always host, kind of a family skate day. And one of the highlights of that was, bringing the idea of a community picnic into the winter months. So anything that you normally would see at one of those summer community events, we try to translate that into winter. So of course the skating was the big draw, but providing food, a mix of indoor and outdoor activities so that people could pop inside to get warmed up, but as well as using the winter scape that we had. So there was lots of snow decorating, making ice globes. And the other point I wanted to make sure is ensuring that we had some other warming. So we had some fire pits, and it really just adds to that ambiance that you'll have seen it in other places, but is functional too, right? Because we want people to stay and enjoy outdoors. So having those options have been really helpful in the past when we could gather in large numbers. And finally, I just wanted to talk about one more kind of activation that was also inspired throughout the pandemic, as we kind of let that guide us in, the community was really looking for ways to connect, as I'm sure many of you listening are aware, in the midst of lockdowns and the isolation, we really wanted to find ways to support the community's mental and physical health. And so we started a hope tree, which is a giant evergreen tree in one of our major parks that it gets lit up throughout the winter months, which you may have one already in your community that you light up maybe with the festive holidays. But in addition to that, we added just a simple mailbox and invited the community to write and share letters with us, as messages of hope, and then those are shared on social media. And so this is our second year with that, and it's very popular with the community. Everybody looks forward to when the tree gets lit. And an example of a message that we receive, my hope is for the people I know and don't know to find mental wellness and to find love and joy in order to survive the pandemic with strength and motivation to thrive once more. So you can get quite some moving messages from the community, and it's been a really great example of something simple that we were able to do that provided a new way to use a space and drove people outdoors in those past winter.
I love that, Catherine. And I loved how you used the asset-based approach that Jayne was talking about, and lighter, quicker, cheaper, we are all for that. And it's also nice to know that when you think about winter placemaking or winter activities, you think of skating and those kind of sport activities. So it's nice to hear about storytelling and art and all those things also being included in the toolkit, if you will. My next question was, did you face any challenges in when you were planning or deploying these winter programming activities? And if you did, how did you overcome them? Catherine, this time we'll go to you first, and then I'll go to Sarah.
Sure, thank you. Yes, I mean, aside from the weather in general being a little bit unpredictable, there's a couple of challenges. So one I mentioned before is finding those kind of warming opportunities for people depending on the location where we want to be, and the willingness of our fire department to agree to whether or not we could have a fire at certain events. So we've, they've been available and wanted to be involved in the past. And so working out the details with us with that in our community has been a challenge from that like logistical standpoint, which we continue to kind of work and build our relationships so that we can I don't know why, we just really want more fires. It's just so cozy. And the other piece, I think, Jayne, you really touched on as part of the winter activation guide, is that kind of winter maintenance piece. So there are spaces in the community that we may think, oh, this would be perfect for, whether it was a story walk or if working with our sports and recreation team, a different kind of outdoor program. But because of, operational constraints and legal constraints, it's not winter maintained. So that just requires a shift in thinking and organizational planning. So, when we've kind of run up to that in the past, it just kind of drives us to do more planning and more cross-functional cooperation so that we can provide more opportunities to the community.
Thank you, and very good points about more planning, to do more planning when doing these things. Sarah, over to you. Did you face any challenges in terms of planning and deploying, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, just the uncertainty of weather here can be a real challenge. For us, it's the downpours of rain that really impact an event's success, and it can just be a little bit unpredictable. And because we're not really concerned as often about those big dumps of snow, we can use things like tents, and then we focus on all of the little add-ons that really make it more attractive to turn out. So we always offer some kind of food. And in the fall and winter, we always do hot drinks. And in the summer, we always do cold drinks. We also focus on scheduling shorter activities and take advantage of times when folks are already outside. So for example, with the little free craft store that we're launching this Thursday, the opening hours are 2 to 6, and it's located on a transit corridor really close to, it's on a bicycle transit corridor, but it's also really close to arterials where the buses go. So what we're hoping is that we catch folks on their way to home from school or daycare or work, and that they're not having to make a special trip, but that they, they can include it in their routines. And then all of a sudden, this previously unused space really makes them feel like they're part of a community. Catherine, I'm so inspired by what you're saying to try to work more with our fire department. We had a little live theater performance on Halloween, and it was uncharacteristically cold that time of year. And we did have a propane heater. I probably shouldn't say this. For legal reasons, we did not have a propane heater, but we're not allowed to have any propane heaters at all here in the city of Victoria due to the bylaws. But it is inspiring to try to work on some relationships to maybe have them for special events, because it really would make it so much easier for people to come out and spend a bit more time. A lot of the patios, the pop-up patios that have been pandemic responses are used here. And I wonder if some of those policies could be translated into one-time community events with all the same safety precautions kept in place. So yeah, something about that to think about.
Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, nothing like food to bring people out and going to where they are and putting things in their regular access paths. Yeah, amazing. Could you share with us an inspiring story about one of these activities and how it changed people's experiences and lives? Sarah, could you go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to talk about the Multicultural Festival that we held at Royal Athletic Park, which is that big fenced off park in our neighborhood. North Park, which is located really close to the downtown in North Park in Victoria, rather, is an incredibly diverse neighborhood. And coming up to Christmas, we know that there's so much more than Christmas being celebrated in North Park. So what we wanted to do is have a winter market, but not focus it on Christmas. So that's why we had a multicultural festival. It was actually the second one of the year that we had. And it was amazing. It was in mid-December, and even though it was wet and rainy and a really dreary day, and there were a ton of other indoor markets going on that weekend, we had over 500 people come out, and they came out to check out the 30 vendors, which was our biggest market to date. And there were kids all over the place and at the kids activity tent, and there were awesome performances. And the part that I liked about it the most was that for a lot of the vendors, it was their very first market experience. So we try to make it as easy as possible and reduce the barriers as much as possible to access. So none of the vendors pay any fees. We provide free tents and tables, lots of volunteers to help with setup and takedown. And then we also provide assistance with going through all the certifications required to sell food. There's a lot of hoops to jump through there, which we help folks out with. And it was actually so successful that in 2020, we started a monthly food and farmers market, but we're actually going to be pivoting and focusing all of our attention on a multicultural festival that will hold 4 times a year instead. It was just, the reception from the community was so positive, and we're having, and it's just more in line with what we'd like to focus on as an organization. So yeah, we're really excited about that. And it's been possible to do in an unused or underused public space, even in the winter. So it has a tiny bit of covered space, but for the most part, it's open air. So it's been great to do.
Nice. That's inspiring to hear. Catherine, do you have a story about winter outdoor activities that's inspiring and if it changed people's experiences and lives?
Yeah, so I would say, like, aside from the hope tree, and I kind of shared that earlier on, I wanted to kind of just share this quote from a community member who often shares our activities on social media. And she said that if you choose not to find joy in the snow, you will have less joy in your life, but still the same amount of snow. And their family often enjoy the story walk trails. But one thing that I wanted to share, which has been kind of amazing to see over the past couple of years, was how our organizational culture has shifted when we put a focus on placemaking, and started in the easy kind of summer months with different activations. But over the past 2 years, our operations team, so if you work for a municipality, that's the team that's responsible for snow clearing and park maintenance and things, started getting inspired by some of the other things that were happening around town. And they came up with this whole penguin peekaboo program, which just is a small, tiny intervention that brings so much community joy. There's little penguins and fish that have uplifting messages on them, and like conservation facts, because we're right on the Lake Simcoe here, and the operations team, so the team that clears snow and manages parks, they pop them up around different parks and road ends, and it just surprises and delights the community as they discover them. And I just thought, like, as we have worked towards building this idea of placemaking in everything that we've done in Innisfil, as it's part of our official planning, it's referenced strongly in our culture master plan. It's how we've now starting to see that culture shift where it's becoming more embedded in across the organization in people who are typically not doing this work. So not maybe the same kind of inspiration, but I thought it would be a really nice thing to share with this group today.
For sure. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so my last question for both of you is, what is a piece of advice that you would give to any projects that are interested in organizing more outdoor winter activities in their communities? Catherine, you can go first.
Yeah, so I like the idea of starting small, kind of, looking at what you have available and how you can just, add something more on there. And with that, looking at how to incorporate your partners, seeking new partners, or listening to the community ideas and what is the community doing themselves. We have in our community, we had a strong community champion who wanted to do things. And so, this person started a Christmas light display contest, that got hundreds of participants and tours around the town. So looking towards the community for their ideas and how we can support what they're already doing has kind of been a good way for us to kind of ease into winter activations.
Got it. Thank you, Catherine. Sarah, how about you? Do you have any piece of advice that you want to give to other projects interested in winter activities?
Yeah, I would definitely echo what Catherine said about finding out what the community is already doing and where you can share resources and collaborate to further improve events. That's what happened with the Multicultural Festival. It actually came out of an Eid Bazaar and celebration that we had at Royal Athletic Park in July. The response had been so enthusiastic. They wanted to have another bazaar, and that idea led into the Multicultural Festival, which is, as we've discussed, now going to continue on for another year. Another thing that we do is we use lots of the food, as we talked about. We will coincide events with when people are already going to be out, but also where they're already going to be. So maybe there's another community event that's going on. Maybe you can co-locate something close to a school or a transit stop so that people don't have to go too far. And then because we have such a shortage of covered spaces and rain is the main issue here on a West Coast winter, we use those pop-up 10 by 10 market tents. And they act as a little bit of a, hey, there's something going on over here, come check it out. And another thing we'll do, we acknowledge that a lot of people aren't able to stay for long. So we'll have things that can be taken away, whether that's little craft kits that people can take with them. And for those that are sticking around for the long haul, whether that's volunteers or facilitators or participants who just want to stick around, we do use those little hand warmers. They're not very environmentally friendly, but they do sort of take the edge off the cold, especially when it's such a wet cold. But yeah, I think those are the things I would add.
Nice. Thank you so much. And I feel like a lot of those things are included in our winter placemaking guide about the food. I think we talk about. Take it to the streets is an important part of our work that we do at 880 Cities. And so it's going to where people are. So amazing to hear from both of you, Sarah and Catherine. Those were all my questions. So now I will pass it to Gabe at CUI for the next part of the session.
Hello. Thank you so much, all of you, Jayne, Jiya, Catherine, and Sarah, for sharing all of your winter activity tips. We've now got some questions here from the audience, so let's dive into those. The first question was about fire pits, and so I think that question could begin with you, Catherine. Could you share the policies you developed or a little bit about how you got fire pits? Our new fire chief is very resistant. What is your advice?
We are still working through that with ours as well. We also have a new chief in our community, which is an exciting opportunity to let them know about all the great things that we do. So we have some procedural things. I'm just going to pop my email into the chat. So for the person who is specifically interested in that, just drop me a line. There we go. And but we are very much still working through it. So we have in the past, when we have used them, we have the tall pyramid kind of shaped ones, but we don't have them out on a regular basis. We've used them for special events only, and those events, the fire department, or we have a volunteer fire department as well, they agreed to participate, and they were there to monitor the fire pits. So we do have, extinguishers available and things like that. Right now, we are hoping for moving that program a little bit forward, and I don't know that we'll hit it this winter, but maybe for next. So we have a great toboggan hill where we think it would be really a great opportunity to just have a pit there. So happy to share what we've had, but we're still continuing these discussions in our community as well.
A work in progress. Would you, Jayne or Jiya or Sarah, have any other tips about fire pits you'd like to add?
Just engaging with your partners, even just starting a basic conversation is super important. You got to get those channels in process. Open lines of communications are always great. We also at 880 Cities really love to demonstrate the power of how things could work, the potential of spaces through pop-ups. So if they're hesitant on allowing propane tanks throughout the whole year, if you could wiggle a little way to say, hey, what about something on Valentine's Day? One event, one off, and you prove that it works, you prove the powership of it all, gather some supporters. We've seen amazing power of pop-ups leading to permanent infrastructure, policy change, all of that. It seems daunting, but some things can really just become powerful and start out of a small conversation, a few bucks, volunteer support, and just proving what's possible.
That's excellent advice. Thank you both. I love the pop-up ideas. Clearly, Sarah has shown that that's a great way of doing things. And also just, the idea of piloting something. Okay, next question is coming to you, Sarah. There's someone who is looking to do more free programming in their municipal parks. And they're wondering if you have some advice, could talk a little bit about the steps you took to make that happen in Victoria.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I'd say the first step is just being very persistent, which some of the city staff may read have as annoying. I just annoy people until, no, I'm very kidding. But there are some existing permits. So some parks, it's as easy as submitting a park permit. And if you represent a nonprofit or a community group, that's often very low or no cost. Some of the obstacles that we've come up against in North Park is that the main park Royal Athletic Park kind of falls outside of that park permitting system. So we've had to go to council to get special permission and special grant funding for the city to give back to the city itself to cover the use of the park for free community events. So finding out what the permits are is definitely the first step. And then if you're finding that the park itself where you'd like to do the programming is sort of exempt from those processes, then it would be talking with the park staff to find out if an agreement could be met. But yeah, it's those relationships and finding out what the necessary steps are would be the first step. And I'm happy to help with that if you wanted to send me an email as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So we can add your email to the shared doc. And so if anyone is interested, oh, and thank you for putting it in there too. If anyone's interested, they can also add their emails into our shared doc and get in touch with one another too, because we'd love, you're all offering all kinds of ideas in here. We'd love for you all to have a way of keeping in touch with one another and asking questions. Would anyone else on our panel like to speak a little bit about how to get free programming in municipal parks before we move on to the next question? Just let me know.
I just say if you are a library, then you've kind of got a little bit of an in with your municipal partners. And if you are not a library, it's certainly usually worth chatting with about partnership opportunities. We're always happy to provide low to no cost programming for the community. That's what libraries are here for. So that's my tip.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm seeing some messages in the chat. I'm just alerting my colleagues that some people are maybe still having trouble getting into the doc. So we'll try to solve that for you. And we can post the link to the doc again here. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is to you, Jayne, or 880 Cities. This Forma says she really likes the idea of the rights to outdoor space in the winter and says that we have a beautiful beach patio, but the town will not plow the walkway to the beachfront and the snowplow drift is vicious. Any tips on how to negotiate access for things like that with your township?
Yeah, prioritizing pedestrian spaces and plowing is something that North American cities come up against. It's just relics of, car-dominated planning that we have here in Canada and throughout North America. So to reprioritize plowing to create livable pedestrian spaces in winter is something that communities of all sizes have really struggled with. We highlight some great examples in the guide of communities who unfortunately have had to take these matters into their own hands. There's a really great group in, I think it was Chicago, called My Block, My Hood, My City. And they do shoveling for schools, school play yards, for seniors, geared apartment buildings, because the city just won't do it. And in our interviews with them, they were also under the understanding that it wasn't necessarily a role that municipalities should take. Despite, here in Toronto and throughout Canada, we sort of assume that your front yard is your responsibility, but it's the municipality's responsibility, to plow the sidewalks and the business districts and all of that. And in Chicago, the city just plows the main street of the business district and nowhere else. So they've taken it into their own hands to shovel out, like I said, schoolyards and pedestrian amenities. And it sort of snowballed from two guys feeling bad for their neighbors to a whole crew of people who shovel pedestrian spaces. So while it sucks that maybe the answer to having access to the beach is, enlisting the help of some young people to dig it out, and I know this is my go-to answer, but proving that people want to use the space is huge. And just because people aren't using it now doesn't mean that there's not like a latent desire for more quality, accessible spaces. So perhaps, yeah, a community run shovel of the beach and like a polar plunge, circling it around an event. While that takes like logistics power and like, time and energy and some funds, we've seen communities do it, but you sort of just have to prove that it's possible in North American cities because we're so stuck in, only automobile spaces get plowed. That was my long-winded way of saying it might start with the community run demonstration of what is possible.
Thank you. Yeah, communities taking it into their own hands is sometimes how it goes. I have another question for you. Does anyone else have any advice on that point before I move on? Okay, so maybe this seems like a question for Sarah or ADD Cities or maybe Catherine too. If you've ever worked with folks who perhaps cannot afford proper outdoor equipment, do you have any advice of things that you did to help them navigate or make an event more accessible to them in that regard? I know that there was something in the chat about skating and needing to have skates, but this is a general question just in terms of outdoor equipment. I'll start with you, Sarah, because I know you've got lots of other things that you do, free lending library, and perhaps you have some ideas.
Yeah, so actually, prior to embarking on this Healthy Communities Initiative project, the North Park Neighborhood Association spent about a year providing support to the folks who were living in a park in North Park. So they were our unhoused neighbors. And we spent a lot of time and resources matching people up with the supports that they needed, whether that was tents or sleeping bags. Over the Christmas break of 2020 to 2021, years meld together, there was actually a flood causing the relocation of about 50 individuals from one park to a parking lot that was a block away and right beside where our current lending hub is. And we helped them build, together with the unhoused neighbors, we built pallet and plywood platforms so that everyone was elevated off of the ground. And all this to say, yeah, it can be logistically difficult to match folks up to the supports that they need. There are a lot of organizations that do this, but the demand is really infinite. People, when you're living outdoors and you don't have the ability to wash or put away your coat at the end of the night, its lifespan is really shortened. So by making those connections with existing nonprofits in your neighborhood, sort of having a little resource list about who you could turn to match someone up with a coat or a sleeping bag or a tent if they need those things. We did a couple clothing drives over the holidays. Actually had one that coincided with our outdoor art workshops in November and December. And so people stopped by with their donations of coats and clothing, while their kids did some art right in the tent beside. And then those were distributed actually at the December 12th Multicultural Festival. So we had a free table where people could come shop for free winter clothing. And it was both for folks in the community, but it was also advertised through the Intercultural Association, which is a group that provides support to new immigrants and refugees, many of whom this was their very first winter, and they just didn't have the coats and everything. And many of them are also living in hotels still because they haven't found accommodations that suit their families yet. So yeah, definitely creating those relationships with the other groups in your city that do this kind of work so that you know who to call when you come across a community member in need.
Thank you, Sarah. That's so inspiring and such a caring community that you're creating. Catherine or Jiya, would you have any other ideas to add on? If not, I'm seeing one more question. I think I'm down to my last question in the chat. And this was specifically just moving back maybe to 880 cities and mobility. It's a person in Quebec, and they're saying that in a wheelchair, there's a lot of snow in Quebec on the sidewalks, and it's very difficult to move around. Do you have any ideas on how to convince the public who is afraid of getting stuck, or how to improve mobility even on sidewalks and getting around cities in Quebec or anywhere?
Yeah, mobility is a very important topic to discuss when it comes to winter. As we've seen, like, a lot of folks just, stay bundled up and indoors if they're safe to do so throughout the winter months, because our cities just absolutely neglect people with mobility concerns and special needs, and our buses stop running and wheel-trans won't get out to your place, and it's an absolute nightmare. And while I can't say that anyone's done it perfectly, engaging with these communities to see, to actually hear what their needs are, is something that we've seen in Houghton, Michigan, that example. They not only did that Jibba Jabba rail jam, but they also used that as a tool to inform their master plan. So they use the Jibba Jabba rail jam to also engage with the community on how winter impacts your mobility. And there's a few other examples in the guide of smaller communities trying to create winter strategies. And half of that is to engage with the community about well, what do you need? What can be done? What are your mobility patterns? What are your impacts? It might be very straightforward for you and I to be well, starting with clearing the sidewalk is key. But creating a master plan with a whole mobility strategy is pretty key to creating at least some shared language around why aren't our winter cities working. We do have a section in the guide called Winter Mobility, and it's about a few examples of some communities who have trialed new snow plowing routes that go up to people's doors, that take a priority route, and some communities who have even converted lawnmowers to be plows in the summer, so that there's a more equitable distribution of plowing routes in the city. So prioritizing snow removal is a huge thing. Also about mobility in transit. We know that bus stops get buried, so even if you can reach the bus stop, getting on the bus because of a snowdrift is a huge impact. There's an example in the guide from Grand Rapids, Michigan, of the community did some engagement and found that they didn't necessarily have the resources to invest in more snow plowing, but people they installed shovels at the bus stop. So it sort of became a community driven self-shovel thing. So communities take care of the bus stops and thereby taking care of bus stop users. While of course we want the municipalities to invest in these resources once again, it sometimes starts with these community driven initiatives. So there's a few more examples like that in the guide, but transit mobility and accessibility concerns are paramount in talking about winter placemaking. If you can't get there safely, what's the point? So that's should be a priority for all communities.
Thank you, Jayne. That's a wonderful idea. I just got such a great picture in my head of communities taking things in their own hands, just having a shovel by the bus stop and just starting to make the change that they want to see. Thank you so much. I think that was our last question. So thank you all. Thank you, Jayne. Thank you, Jiya. Thank you, Catherine and Sarah, for inspiring us and our communities with all the things that are possible during winter and how to make the changes that we want to see in our communities. That was such an insightful conversation. We would like to continue these sessions with the purpose of learning and improving, and it would be really valuable to us. And for you, the audience that have joined us today, thank you too for coming and sharing all of your guides and questions and ideas in the chat. We would like you to fill out a short survey if you don't mind. We'll email it to you later today, but we'll also drop it into the chat now. I promise it'll take you less than 3 minutes to reply, but getting your feedback really helps us as we design these sessions going forward to make them useful to you and to other placemakers across Canada. We also want to let you know that this session has been recorded, and the link to the recording to the session will also be shared with you all via email so that you can share it with other colleagues who may be interested. We'll also make sure to add to the Google Doc the link to the chat information from our last winter session that we had in December with park people. Some of the questions that didn't come up today came up then about sharing equipment and different things. So that together, this is an incredible resource. So thank you so much. We hope everyone enjoyed the session as much as we did, and we hope you can join us for future mob sessions. See you soon. Our next one should be coming up just at the beginning of March with Vivre en Ville, with more information about cities and getting outside and enjoying placemaking activities together. So thank you so much.